I used to work as an event coordinator at the Swan and Dolphin Resort and Convention Center. Sometimes we had to arrive at the venue in the early hours of the day, before the union laborers arrived, to prepare for special events. However, one day, one of my managers reduced my working hours due to a budgetary decline in the company. This resulted in a decrease in my income, causing me to fall behind on rent. To make ends meet, I needed to find additional sources of income until I could secure more hours or find a new job. Eventually, I began selling various items on online platforms like Craigslist and eBay, which helped supplement my income. Although it wasn't a significant amount, it allowed me to financially support myself during that challenging period. At the time, I was in the process of selling a vintage radio from the 1940s, which had sentimental value as it had belonged to my late grandfather. I received several offers for it, but most were lowball offers that didn't meet the item's value. Then one day, I received a message from an interested buyer willing to offer $500 for the radio, which exceeded my asking price. I eagerly accepted the offer, and the buyer mentioned he could pick it up after 5 p.m., which worked well for me as I'd be home by then. At 5 p.m., I heard a knock on my door, and when I opened it, I was greeted by an older man, possibly in his late 50s, with a long gray beard. He had the appearance of a stereotypical biker, often seen in country movies. He had a deep, raspy voice and said, "Hey there, I'm here for that radio." I welcomed him inside and showed him the radio on the kitchen table, even offering him a snack. Strangely, he began scrutinizing the radio's condition, inspecting both the exterior and interior for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he placed it down and offered $300, explaining that the radio's condition wasn't ideal. I reluctantly agreed, feeling intimidated and uneasy about arguing with him. We completed the transaction, and he left with the radio. Despite being relieved that he was gone, something about the encounter gave me an unsettling feeling. Later that evening, I was watching a movie in my room when my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, but the area code was familiar. Curious, I answered, and immediately recognized the voice on the other end. It was the man from earlier. He thanked me for my hospitality and kindness, but then shocked me with a chilling revelation. He confessed that when he entered my house, he had intended to harm me with a knife he had concealed in his pocket. However, my kindness had dissuaded him, and he couldn't bring himself to go through with it. He bid me farewell and hung up, leaving me in shock and disbelief. I was at a loss for what to do next. I considered calling the police, but I later discovered that the number he used was fake, generated from an app, making it untraceable. Frightened by the experience, I immediately removed the listing from Craigslist and vowed never to use the platform again. To this day, I remain unaware of the man's true identity or whether he faced any legal consequences for his disturbing admission. This harrowing encounter serves as a stark reminder of the potential dangers when dealing with unknown individuals on online platforms. It underscores the importance of exercising caution and prioritizing personal safety when buying or selling items online, as we can never truly know the intentions of those we encounter in the digital realm. Please, always be vigilant and prioritize safety when engaging in such transactions. This incident occurred during my mid-20s in 2012 when I resided in Sarasota, Florida. Fresh out of college, I had secured a position as a software engineer with a reputable company. This job allowed me to move out of my parents' house and into a relatively modest apartment, which, while not spacious, provided enough room for most of my belongings. When moving, there's often the likelihood of having some items you no longer need or want. In my case, I found myself in this situation and decided to list some of these items for sale on Craigslist, which was quite popular at the time for buying and selling all sorts of things. Among the items I posted for sale was a large tote bag I had used back when I played sports. It was in good condition, and I hoped to find a buyer since sports were a big deal in my town. Within a day, I received a message from someone nearby who expressed interest in the tote. He appeared friendly, lived nearby, and was willing to pay more than my listed price. Being in close proximity, he suggested meeting at my apartment to facilitate the transaction. Admittedly, I felt a bit uneasy about a complete stranger knowing my address, but I shrugged it off and agreed to meet later that evening. As evening fell, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find a man in his mid-30s with a Swedish accent. He immediately extended his arms for a hug, explaining that it was a customary greeting in Sweden. As a gay man, I didn't mind the gesture and considered it a friendly act. He held onto the HUD for an uncomfortably long 10 seconds before letting go and asking for the tote. I handed it over, and he handed me a $100 bill, ensuring our hands made contact. While it felt odd, I dismissed it as a cultural difference and accepted his thanks, along with another hug, before he departed through the hallway. Fast forward 2 days, I fell ill and called in sick to work, deciding to rest and take a nap in my room. Suddenly, I was jolted awake by heavy knocking at my door. Upon opening it, I was met with 2 police officers and a property manager. Perplexed, I inquired about the situation, to which they showed me a photo of the man I had sold the tote to. I confirmed that I knew him and explained the transaction was limited to the bag, as I knew nothing more about him. They recorded my personal information, my description of the man, and any interactions we had. When I asked why they needed this information, they could only tell me it was confidential. After gathering the details, they left. It wasn't until a few days later that I learned the shocking truth. The man I had sold the bag to was wanted for possessing 23 terabytes of illegal content. To put this into perspective, 1 terabyte equals 1,000 gigabytes, meaning he had around 13,000 hours of such content downloaded. I was horrified to realize I had unwittingly welcomed a wanted predator into my home. The tote bag I had sold him was intended to store certain documents related to covering his tracks, a plan that clearly fell apart as he eventually got caught. Following this revelation, I underwent a week-long police interview process. Gradually, my initial shock subsided, and I started to return to normalcy. In the aftermath, I decided to delete my entire Craigslist account and vowed never to sell anything online again. I hope sharing my story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of trusting people online. Before delving into my narrative, I'd like to emphasize that this isn't the kind of tale that will make you leap from your seat. Rather, it's a deeply unsettling and real experience for me. To set the stage, I'm an 18-year-old female residing on a ranch in an isolated small rural town in Iowa, surrounded mainly by farmland and fields. I spent my entire life here and have had the pleasure of meeting some genuinely respectful townsfolk. It's a quiet little town, which I won't name, but it has a population of around 2,000 people. The events I'm about to recount occurred during the summer of 2021 and remain the most horrifying incident I've ever encountered. For context, I work at a gun store in my town, which is generally a safe environment. However, I typically commute to and from work on my bicycle because both of my parents work late shifts in the city and can't pick me up until later in the evening. One fateful day, my bicycle was pilfered from the rack outside the shop when I momentarily let my guard down. Naturally, I was furious about this, but I decided against reporting it to the sheriff's office because they rarely took such matters seriously in our neck of the woods. Their investigations were often half-hearted, and they frequently claimed a lack of evidence. With the police no longer a viable option, I called my dad to apprise him of the situation. He assured me he'd pick me up after work. During our car ride home that evening, my dad lectured me about my carelessness. While he offered this well-meaning advice, I occupied myself by browsing Craigslist on my computer, searching for an affordable replacement bike. I didn't need an extravagant model, just something to get me from point A to point B within 20 minutes. Lo and behold, I stumbled upon a seemingly great deal. A standard bike in excellent condition for only $70. The seller was located just 15 miles from the nearest city, making it a lengthy drive. Since my parents were at work that night and we had no available car, I decided to take an Uber to the arranged drop-off point. When I disembarked from the Uber, I noticed a black van parked on the side of the road, its lights turned off. It was the only vehicle in the vicinity, so I presumed it belonged to the seller. I messaged the seller to confirm, and he replied in the affirmative, instructing me to approach. Approaching the driver's side cautiously, I saw a man lower his window and introduce himself as Jeff. He claimed to be the seller of the bike, which he said was in the back of the van. He suggested I open the doors and retrieve it. Strangely, I wondered why he wasn't doing this himself. When I inquired, he cited a bad knee and discomfort walking, prompting him to delegate the task to me. Fatigued and not keen on prying further, I reluctantly made my way toward the rear of the van, where the bike supposedly awaited. As I prepared to open the van doors, I glimpsed, albeit faintly through a window, a man wearing a vendetta mask staring back at me. The moment I noticed him, a wave of unease washed over me, and I instinctively realized this wasn't a typical transaction. There was no bike in there. Careful not to reveal that I had spotted the masked individual, I informed the driver that I no longer required the bike and he was free to leave. Yet, I couldn't shake the fear that he knew I had seen someone else in the van. I did my best to maintain composure. I immediately sprinted toward a nearby Walmart, while the driver attempted to negotiate, offering to lower the price. I ignored his pleas, hoping he would simply depart, fully aware that the bike was a ruse. As I approached Walmart, the van suddenly sped away into the night, disappearing from view. Inside Walmart, I recounted the incident to the security personnel, prompting them to contact the police. I provided details about my location, actions, and the conversation that transpired. The Craigslist listing had already vanished by then, and I never came across it again. I couldn't offer a comprehensive description of the van, except to say that it was black with tinted windows. I assumed the police would inform my parents about the incident, but as I was 18 at the time, they couldn't disclose anything without my consent. I managed to Uber safely back home, relieved that no one was following me. To this day, I remain uncertain about the intentions of that man, but they were undoubtedly malicious. My advice to anyone considering Craigslist transactions is to exercise caution and, ideally, bring someone along with you. It may save your life.